Good evening. This is Atheist History Week, and I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Each week at this time, we look at the week's anniversaries in the history of free thought: atheism, agnosticism, secularism, humanism, rationalism, whatever you have, ism. We discuss notable people, the famous and maybe the not so famous, who were born or died or achieved something very significant in the history of free thought during this calendar week. And we look at significant events that took place this week in history: court cases, publishing events, religious riots, burnings at the stake, and other faith-based fun and games. This week, the third week in June, we have a few interesting stories for you. We have a couple of court cases. We're going to look at the lives of three different novelists and a philosopher. Quoting from the United States Constitution, Article 6, "The senators and representatives and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. But no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States." Naturally, there have been legislators and religious fundamentalists ever since the beginning of the Republic who have tried to get around that very, very clear admonition in the Constitution that there be no religious test. For one thing, the affirmation. If you ask any group of 10 people in the United States if it was a requirement to swear on the Bible in court or to take public law, my guess is 10 out of 10 of them would say, yeah, sure, you got to swear on the Bible. Well, of course you do not. Oath or affirmation, it says. Oath meaning swear on the Bible, or by the way, the Koran or anything else. And affirmation merely saying, I affirm. You're bound by the same rules and the same laws, but you're not swearing to God. In the United States, you don't have to. It's the only one. However, some states, for instance Maryland, had in their own state constitution, had a requirement that, quote, "a declaration of belief in the existence of God was required as a qualification for any office of profit or trust in the state." A man by the name of Roy Torcaso was asked by his employer to become a notary public so that he could do the company's business as a notary. And Mr. Torcaso then found out that there was this unconstitutional religious requirement. He sued to become a notary public in the state of Maryland without affirming a belief in God, and his case wound up going up to the Maryland Supreme Court, which offered a rather cute definition of the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution. The Maryland Court of Appeals said, "The petitioner is not compelled to believe or disbelieve under threat of punishment or other compulsion. True, unless he makes the declaration of belief, he cannot hold public office in Maryland, but he's not compelled to hold public office," unquote. Their cute distinction was, of course, that you don't have to be in government, you don't have to hold office, you don't have to run for state senator or governor. But what they were doing, of course, was effectively barring atheists, agnostics, secularists, humanists, rationalists, skeptics, anybody else from holding office in the state of Maryland. The case went to the Supreme Court. Mr. Torcaso continued fighting it, and he went to the Supreme Court. And in 1961, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a unanimous decision overturning the Maryland Supreme Court. Wrote for the majority, for the unanimous majority of the Supreme Court, it was largely to escape religious test oaths and declarations that a great many of the early colonists left Europe and came here hoping to worship in their own way. It soon developed, however, that many of those who had fled to escape religious test oaths turned out to be perfectly willing, when they had the power to do so, to force dissenters from their faith to take oaths in conformity with the faith. There were, however, wise and far-seeing men in the colonies, too many to mention, who spoke out against test oaths and all the philosophy of intolerance behind them. We repeat and again reaffirm that neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion. Justice Black of the Supreme Court in Torcaso v. Watkins, a case that was decided on June 19th, in 1961. A couple of years later, on June 17th in 1963, we had another court case in this country. In the 60s, many of these came up for the first time. And this one, the Abington Town School District versus Shemp, was even more far-reaching in its scope. On this date in 1963, the U.S. Supreme Court banned Bible reading in the schools. Now, many school districts and other jurisdictions around the country said, okay, you don't have to affirm belief in God, but the Bible text and one of the pillars of Western civilization, so children should understand the Bible. They don't have to believe in God, but they just should know the Bible. So, in Pennsylvania, there was a law requiring that, quote, at least 10 verses from the Holy Bible shall be read without comment at the opening of each school, a public school, on each school day. Any child shall be excused from such Bible reading or attending such Bible reading upon the written request of his parent or guardian, unquote. In other words, kids don't have to listen to the Bible. They can go stand in the hall and then be taunted and probably beaten up by their classmates for the rest of the day, and maybe for the rest of the semester in school. These religious exercises were broadcast into each class through public address systems and were conducted under the supervision of a teacher by students. The broadcast concluded with a recitation of the Lord's Prayer, with students asked to stand and repeat the prayer in unison. Then a flag salute. An interesting sidelight, which is maybe not such a sidelight, is that the Shemp, Abington Town School District v. Shemp case was packaged together with another case, and that was Murray v. Curlett, which challenged a similar practice adopted by the Baltimore School Board, requiring reading without comment a chapter from the, quote, Holy Bible, unquote, and or the Lord's Prayer to open the school day. The Murray in Murray v. Curlett was the most hated woman in America, Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who went on to found American Atheists subsequently. It is widely believed in free thought circles that the various government officials who were involved with the case put the two cases together because they saw what was coming. There was no question that Madalyn Murray O'Hair's case and Ed Shemp's case would both be decided in favor of the plaintiffs, Shemp and O'Hair, Murray. But what they saw that was going to happen, but they didn't want Madalyn Murray O'Hair to get the credit because she was so well known and such an outspoken atheist, appearing on late night talk shows and everything else. They wanted her pushed to the side, so they folded her case into the Shemp case and decided the Shemp case. The Abington Shemp decision also followed a 1962 Engel v. Vitale Supreme Court decision, which had ruled classroom prayer unconstitutional in the public schools. Ed Schemp's case stands out as one of the most important in the history of free thought in America, and one of the three most important of the 1960s. Ed Schemp, who wrote a terrific case and won it, and for all of us who don't believe in, who do believe in the separation of church and state. I promised you three novelists. Salman Rushdie was born on June 19th in 1947. And by the way, I just finished reading The Enchantress of Florence, which he published several years ago, and I just got around to. Terrific book, great scholarship about the Renaissance, both in Italy and in the East, which of course Salman Rushdie is an expert on, and a terrific yarn. I recommend it to you very highly. Salman Rushdie was born in Bombay, what we now call Mumbai, in a middle-class Muslim family. He was sent to rugby school in England, and his family then later moved to Pakistan. He had a checkered career, acting, television, and freelance copywriting, and then settled down to writing. He had several successes, including Midnight Children and Shame, but it was his novel, The Satanic Verses, which was banned in India and South Africa, and which brought down the notorious death fatwa against him by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini of Iran in February of 1989. Suddenly, Salman Rushdie was one of the most famous people in the world, because the whole of the world's billion or so Muslims were told that they had license to kill this man and even get a reward for doing so. He was protected by the British police, probably still is. I know he was for many, many years. The fatwa was finally lifted by the imams of Iran 20 years later, but there's another one someplace in Iran, another screwball, who has put out his own fatwa on Rushdie. What was there in the Satanic Verses that they found so crazy? He just wrote about Muhammad. He didn't make up anything particular. I mean, nothing that we would even think about twice. But you're not allowed to do it, and he depicted Muhammad basically as a man. A man with lusts and avarices and greeds and everything else, just like the rest of us. That's enough. Kill him and get a reward for doing it. And a couple of people around Rushdie died. His Norwegian publisher was killed. There were rioting in several Islamic cities that caused many deaths. You know, people running out in the streets and screaming, "We got to kill Salman Rushdie," and getting themselves killed instead, which probably is a better idea. Rushdie has written, he wrote an essay for the Times, New York Times, in 2002, in which he wrote, "If the moderate voices of Islam cannot or will not insist on the modernization of their culture and of their faith as well, then it may be these so-called Rushdies who have to do it for them. For every such individual who is vilified and oppressed, 2 more, 10 more, 1,000 more will spring up. They will spring up because you can't keep people's minds, feelings, and needs in jail forever, no matter how brutal your inquisition." And in an interview with the Washington, or in an article with the Washington Post a couple of years ago, he wrote, In India, as elsewhere in our darkening world, religion is the poison in the blood. Where religion intervenes, mere innocence is no excuse. Yet we go on skating around this issue, speaking of religion in the fashionable language of respect. What is there respect in any of this, or in any of the crimes now being committed almost daily around the world in religion's dreaded name? Salman Rushdie, born June 19, 1947, and as he famously remarked just about a year ago, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini issued a fatwa against him a little over 20 years ago, and as Salman Rushdie said, I'm still here, the Ayatollah's dead. Joyce Carol Oates was born on June 16th in 1938. Maybe the most prolific good writer that the United States has ever produced, and she is going strong in her early 70s. There are plenty of pulp writers who turn out, 8,000, 10,000 words a day. I'm talking about the good writers. Joyce Carol Oates has won the O. Henry Award, the National Book Award. She's twice been nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. She was brought up in a Catholic family, but in an interview in 1993 said, "You're born Catholic and you're baptized, then you become a lapsed Catholic for the next 90 years. Quote unquote. Boy, do I identify with that one. She is a professor at Princeton, and she says, I'm not a person who feels very friendly toward organized religion. I think people who have been brainwashed through the centuries, the churches, particularly the Catholic Church, are patriarchal organizations that have been invested with power for the sake of the people in power, who happen to be men. It breeds corruption. I found going to church every Sunday and on holy days an exercise in extreme boredom. I've never felt that anyone who stands up and says, look, I have the answers, never felt that he had the answers. How can people still be superstitious, she asks, still believe in nonsense and astrology and grotesque demonic religions of every kind, every fundamentalist religion crowding us on all sides? Joyce Carol Oates, June 16th, 1938. In 1948, on June 21st, Ian McEwan was born. Now, you may not be as familiar with Ian McEwan as you are with Salman Rushdie or Joyce Carol Oates, but if you've seen the movie Atonement, you know what he's done, and that was a biggie 2 years ago. I recommend that you read the book as well. Absolutely terrific. He has won just about every prize in the United Kingdom and several American prizes for his novels like The Cement Garden, The Comfort of Strangers, A Child in Time, Amsterdam, another one I've read which is terrific, Saturday, which is about the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and On Chesil Beach. McEwan is an atheist, straight out, I'm an atheist, and he is a friend of Richard Dawkins, and he is often featured on Dawkins' Channel 4 series on religion and atheism in the UK. It's called The Root of All Evil, which is a perfectly good title as far as I'm concerned. McEwan wrote in an interview in the New Republic just last year, I'm an atheist. I really don't believe for a moment that our moral sense comes from a God. It's human, universal. It's being able to think our way into the minds of others. People who do not have a sky god and don't have a set of supernatural beliefs assert their beliefs in moral values and in love and in the transcendence that they might experience in landscape or art or music or sculpture or whatever. Since they do not believe in an afterlife, it makes them give more value to life itself. The little spark that we do have becomes all the more valuable when you can't be trading off any moments for eternity. My own view of religion is that people must be free to worship all the gods they want, but it's only the secular spirit that will guarantee that freedom. Ian McEwan, June 21st. Also on June 21st, but all the way back in 1905, the philosopher I promised you, Jean-Paul Sartre, was born in Paris. An only child, and by the way, the great-nephew of Albert Schweitzer. Everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people know that Sartre lived his life with the writer Simone de Beauvoir, the writer of The Second Sex, and Sartre was probably the most prominent exponent of the philosophy that came to be called existentialism. When I was a young man in college in the 50s, his book, Being in Nothingness, was required, not reading, required carrying when I was a young man in the 1950s. The book was this thick, this big, weighed about 3 pounds. It had a yellow cover, and like everyone else, I bought it as a remainder from the Strand bookstore for about $1. But the point was, you had to be seen carrying it in the early 50s. Otherwise, you were not an intellectual. You were not even a pseudo if you didn't carry the book. And besides, it was supposed to be a big attraction for girls who thought you would be an intellectual. Sartre wrote several novels, and Existentialism and Humanism, and What is Literature. He was an exponent of the very left-wing, including communist causes, during the 50s and the 60s, and he got himself, he probably would not have been allowed into the United States, because in the along with Bertrand Russell, he set up an international tribunal, which is a big PR move, really, basically, but to judge war crimes by the United States in Indochina. Illusion, he said, has been smashed to bits. Martyrdom, salvation, and immortality are falling to pieces. The edifice, meaning of the church, is going to rack and ruin. I collared the Holy Ghost in the basement and threw him out. We have lost religion, he said, but we have gained humanism. One of the most thought-provoking things I've ever read in my life is his play, No Exit. I've never seen it performed, but it's 3 characters in one room, and they go through conversations back and forth, A, B, C, B, C, A, B, C, B, A. They keep going around and around until they realize that they're in this room without doors or windows, and they realize they're in hell, and hell is other people. Kind of dispiriting, but that's Jean-Paul Sartre, and that's just about it for atheism in history this week, the 3rd week in June. And that's about it for this week in atheist history. We have just looked at the philosopher and novelist and playwright Jean-Paul Sartre. We've covered the Scottish novelist Ian McEwan, the American novelist Joyce Carol Oates, and the Indian ex-Muslim, Anglo-Indian is what they call it? Yes, Anglo-Indian novelist Salman Rushdie, who is an ex-Muslim. And most important this week, the 2 famous court cases, the Abington Town School District v. Shemp, which Bible reading in the schools in 1963, the Torcaso v. Watkins case that overturned a Maryland provision that people had to affirm a belief in God before they could hold any kind of state office, including notary public. Good grief. At any rate, and when I mentioned the Engel v. Vitale Supreme Court decision of 1962, and I should have said something back then that a few minutes ago about that, that ruled that classroom prayer was unconstitutional in the public schools. In other words, there were plenty of places in America where children were required to actually pray, not just to listen to the Bible, but to actually pray in school. In 1962, Engel v. Vitale turned that down. Of course, among atheists, it's long been recognized that prayer in school is not ended. As somebody once said, anybody who's ever taken a calculus test in school knows that there is prayer in school. That's This Week in Atheist History. I'm John Rafferty, president of the Secular Humanist Society, a member of New York City Atheists, and I'll be here again next week, and I hope you will too.